We do a lot of podcasts, and we track the podcasts that are really well viewed. We had a friend of mine on here, and his name's Anthony Malatesta. He works for a company called Wellesley Hills Financial. They're a broker in our space. Not just in our space, but they do transactions, but are on the business side. That's like one of the most well-watched of our podcasts because it applies to anybody who's in business.
Yes.
Right? Like anyone. And I think this applies to anybody who's in business because we're in the technology age. It just is what it is. I mean, not that I would have dealt with it the same way, but Ted Kaczynski kind of saw what was going on a lot longer before we all did.
You're gonna get your channel banned.
We're gonna get demonetized. I'm gonna have to cut that out.
No. I mean, I'm not saying I agree with the guy. I'm just saying that if you've ever read it, he seemed to have kind of a beat on where things were going.
Completely.
And I will say, like, we're in the technology age now. Like,
yes.
Again, I'll give a shout out to Alan Koppelman again. He's in the sales. I said it last week. If you're in our business and you're not selling software, you're dead.
Welcome to the Payments Experts Podcast, a podcast of Global Legal Law Firm. We hope you enjoy this episode.
It's very interesting. Like Michael, I don't know if you saw this. Michael Burry yesterday did a huge bet against AI.
Oh yeah,
which I thought was great.
Did he really?
Oh yeah,
wow.
Dude. Like it's got a bubble. But I find it because you're on the front end of having kids. I'm somewhat on the back end of it because I've got a lot in my house and from 13 to 22.
Yeah, amazing.
And really with the 13 and 14-year-old, it's front and center. And so when I went to back to school night, I was at my daughter's math class, and he says, "Look, I can tell when the kids are using AI. It's simple math." He says they're great during the coursework. He's like, we get to the test, they're crappy.
Yep.
So he's like, I know that they're using it at some point. At that,
that's traditional education doing what it's supposed to do.
I agree. But at the same time, like, most people see it as it's like very, very early. Like you say, the internet.
Yeah,
I agree. Same thing. I mean, I'm a little older than you. He and I are about the same age.
Yeah.
When the internet came, it was more of this entertainment value. Right, and I feel like AI will be that way to a large degree. Yeah, a large degree, right?
Yeah.
Dude, the stuff that amazes me about the AI that I've seen is the optics. The stuff that they've done with pictures and video, and it's fascinating. Like what they're able. It's scary, but it's also fascinating.
Okay, so if you guys don't mind, I mean that actually is like a perfect segue into like what.
Tell us.
So the so you have this continuum of like on one hand you have the 17-year-old making the prank call. On the other hand, you have a nation state that has like a secret about Dropbox, and they're not going to tell anyone, and therefore none of your information on Dropbox is potentially safe at all, right?
Yeah.
That theoretically, right? There's always going to be this unknown. So the tricky part about the 17-year-old making the prank call is that with AI, now you can sound like anyone. Now you can look like anyone. There was an instance where there was a UK construction firm that had an employee in Hong Kong, and he wired $25 million to, I think, like the wrong bank account because he was on a Zoom call with 4 people, and they spoofed all 4 people that were on the Zoom call. They just faked the entire thing.
Wow.
And they talked this guy into wiring $25 million. Like,
I'm just seeing Y2K and people like hold up in places.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And so that's essentially like where. So Gene called me in 2019, and it was right before the pandemic, and he said, we had been working on a couple different projects, and he said, hey, I think I actually have a security vulnerability for my MSP, for my company, and I was hoping that you could, like maybe we could workshop something. And he said, so there's 2 problems that I have. One is I don't really have a good way just right out of the box of making sure I know who I'm talking to when someone calls into my help desk, right? He has the whole point of an MSP, the whole point of an IT provider is you sit by the phone and you wait for one of your, like a company that is your client, one of their employees to call in and say, hey, I have this problem, like my computer's
firefighter.
Yeah, exactly. You're a firefighter. And so that was one problem. And the other problem was, most of the time, this is for password resets, people call in all the time and say, I can't get into the systems that I need to use to do my job. It's extremely frustrating this is why the IT Crowd was like such a popular show, is because there's so much emotion and empathy tied up with like people just simply trying to do their job and kind of shitting on IT. Forgive my French.
Oh no, this is wide open. You can say anything you want on here.
But and but that challenge is like, so that person is essentially a level 1 support tech who's ready to pick up the phone. They're emotionally like set to be yelled at. They're kind of like they have that expectation, right? So that's one problem. Person calls in, they can't get into whatever business tool they're trying to use, even their email, whatever it is. They ask for a password reset. You don't know who they are, and you also don't have a mechanism to send them their password really rapidly, securely. He was doing it like there were a bunch of MSPs are still doing it where you just send it over email. You just reset their password and then you send them a new password over email.
Right.
And so this is the question: what happens if your email is blown, or what happens if like they don't have 2-factor on their email, right? So we zoomed out and we were like, okay, this is actually like a bigger question, because the internet is redundant all the way down to the protocol level, right? Like if you look at the HTTP protocol, if you send packets and you're like, okay, cool, I'm just trying to load Instagram, and if one errors out, it'll just resend it, right? So there's redundancy from that point all the way up to, if you have a Gmail account and you're sending an email to someone, and if I send you from my personal Gmail account, if I send you an email, Chris, we don't know how many places that exists on the internet.
That pings off of. Yeah.
That could exist in 100 data centers, 1,000 hard drives, maybe more than that. It's not unreasonable to say like it exists everywhere.
Wow.
And so the question is there a class of data where we shouldn't do that? And the answer is yes.
Oh, of course.
Right? So that's so essentially the foundation of Traceless is we think that the zeitgeist of ephemeral data, that's what we call it, is here. And so there are, mechanisms where you're sending a contract to a client, and there's an extremely sensitive bit of information in that contract. You're exchanging evidence, or you're exchanging diligence, or you're doing discovery.
Yeah.
Right? You're passing information back and forth with the client. Like, yes, that can live in encrypted email.
That's why we open data rooms.
Exactly.
Yeah, where we can exchange information.
Exactly. But then you have to make sure that data room goes away.
Yeah, of course.
Right?
Of course. Yeah, right? In a reasonable amount of time. Yeah,
exactly.
sure.
Yeah. So that's exactly the sort of the philosophy and the inspiration behind Traceless.
I'll actually show my age a little bit here. I go back to Will Ferrell on Saturday Night Live. Lockbox. I don't know if you guys ever saw that episode. If you haven't seen that episode, just do Will Ferrell Lockbox and watch. It's great.
Yeah. He's
it's a box with a lock.
That's it. That's it. That's 99% of the time that's all you need to do. Right.
Yeah.
So basically, what Traceless is we essentially create. It's an AI platform, which is complicated, and I can get into that later if we want to, but basically it's a toolkit for businesses to send and receive sensitive information, leaving nothing at rest, and to on-demand send identity verifications. So specifically to prevent the AI problem and to prevent the 17-year-olds, right? So
I think that's really good. So how much do you know about our world? I mean, I know you've kind of engaged in it here and there, but how much do you know about about payments and the people that are operating within it and the data that's associated with it?
Honestly, not as much as I should.
Yeah,
but it is a fascinating, variegated world, right? It's like it's some of it's really old.
Yeah,
some of it's newer.
Yeah,
it's complex, and I mean there's some really interesting facets to it.
Well, there's a ton of applicability to what Traceless does that would come into this world, right? And and for us, that's our audience, right? And I don't think people are really like, they think data security and they're thinking stuff like PCI compliance,
encryption.
And so for us, I don't necessarily always believe that. I mean, I believe that the stuff that you're talking about, having an audit of somebody's business, seeing where there are vulnerabilities, knowing how to shore those up. I haven't seen a data breach up close and firsthand, but they're happening all the time.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, I get the emails. I don't know how much the people that are operating in our space might be targets for that, but I do believe that people understanding their vulnerabilities are super important.
Yes.
Because at some point it may happen. Yeah. And a lot of the guys that we deal with, they've actually started small, ended up big.
Yep.
and the footprint changes, and so
Completely.
so maybe their responsibility changes, but they're not thinking about this.
Completely. Yeah. I mean, in the payments space, in the processing space, in some ways you guys are doing great because it is an older industry. PCI has been around forever.
Yeah.
Right. And so the expectation that everything that you're doing is getting passed back and forth in a way that is encrypted. I mean, in the way that hopefully the entire internet is encrypted, but some of it's not, some of it is. That's all sort of like, that's been put to bed, right? There is like the macro level risk that quantum computers show up and all of a sudden everything that is encrypted that's been passed through the internet over the last 20 years is legible, right? But again, that's not that big a deal. The strategies for fraud detection in the processing space have gotten really sophisticated. And so I think there's a lot of really good stuff happening, and there's a lot of really basic stuff that can continue to happen. You know, like we said, it's just like if you want to prevent the 17-year-old from, you know, calling in and taking over someone's identity, all you have to do is like send him a 6-digit PIN code, or like send a push notification to his device using like Okta or Microsoft Authenticator or something like that, right? So across the board, I think there are always like really basic things. The common refrain that happens in every audit that I do is there are going to be one or two things where I'm just like, this is so basic. You guys can patch this in 5 minutes and you are going to sleep better at night. And until you do, this is a legitimate liability, you know? But it is interesting because AI is absolutely going to be just such a crazy boost for the scammers, for you know, people trying to scam in sort of any environment. And in the payments processing space, I think that could get weird, I guess. But you know, to
give us an example of weird.
Well,
and I know it's hypothetical to a large degree, but like, what do you see as like probable?
I mean, they're just going to get progressively more sophisticated. There are instances where, you know, like we've done a couple instances where we've looked at point of sale systems, right? Some of these point of sale systems that I've looked at have been hand rolled, right? They're using Android, they're using a Raspberry Pi system, that kind of thing. That is really simple. Obviously, we're talking about something totally local. You know, it's a mom and pop restaurant. They got these boxes, but you know, they're on the network. There could be something set up. There's a possibility of a threat actor gaining a persistent foothold and essentially like listening to all of their internal traffic. So one risk as more things come online and are maybe like, you know, tied into the internet is that, I mean, there was an instance where I think it was like in the Netherlands, like they had to shut down or they had to basically take a bunch of their buses offline. I mean, so Chinese-made buses, but they were phoning home. They were able to just say, like, they bought buses, and there was like a chip somewhere in the bus that was just like flying all the data back.
Wow,
really?
Sending it back to the mainland. Yep. And so the concern is that as things get more sophisticated, a payment processor that's grown up, they've gotten bigger, they have more. You know, you talk about attack surface, right? They have more surface area that they need to cover. One of those things is, you know, if they are using complex IT infrastructure, if they have a lot of boxes close by, there is the likelihood that something's listening, and the sort of, if you have to always think about like the actual value of the hack versus the risk taken versus like the work, right?
Well, dude, it's crazy you're talking about this. I went to the Goose concert in Vegas at the beginning of October. Mm-hmm. And we're hanging out. It was like this like festival like in the desert. It was actually pretty cool. It was called the Rise Festival. And they do all these paper lanterns. And there's like tens of thousands going up at the same time. It was incredible. Like I thought it was going to be kind of gay, but it was actually super cool. And visually it was really unbelievable.
Yeah.
But we're hanging out because, you know, it was an EDM thing. And then like Goose and John Mayer played. So I was like, okay, I'm down. But the EDM stuff, whatever. So and it was kind of a ways away.
I'm a raver. You're hurting my feelings.
No. Well, we went and saw Spafford the other night, dude.
Absolutely.
If you haven't listened to Spafford, dude, we'll
it's
talk about that later.
It's basically an EDM show.
It's basically an EDM show.
I'll check it out.
With instruments. But I'm at the Goose show and I meet these guys, and they had come up from Phoenix. One dude was from Kansas City. Another dude lived in Annapolis, right? And guys are like everyday dudes. I would have never thought anything about them. And I'm like, well, what do you guys do? And they're like, we build skiffs. And I was like, really? And he's like, so you work for the government? He saw, it's not just government building skiffs. And he's like, I said, really? He says, yeah. And then we started talking. He says, well, yeah, you know rebar? The Chinese have figured out how to use rebar as an antenna.
No.
So, no, dude, like, and they start telling me these stories, no kidding, about all the different things about, you know, facilities where they're building these skiffs because of stuff that's happened.
Yes.
Where they figured out in the infrastructure itself how to do some sort of covert. Listen, it was
totally
gnarly.
Wild. Yeah.
And so, and I said, if they know, if the Chinese know, we obviously know. Like, but I'm sitting there wondering about all the infrastructure that we've built over time that we've taken for granted that now is being used as a tool.
100%.
And when you're sitting here talking about like game theory and mapping stuff out and how to be on the defense and build something defensible, which is what these guys did, which is what made me think of it. How much have we built already that's now being used against us potentially, right? Like that's the thought that came to my mind.
That's an ongoing question.
Yeah.
Right? That's an ongoing question. But so to finally answer your question, you know, the risk for a payment processor that's gotten big is like you want to watch out for the identity takeover stuff that is going to lead to like massive financial exfiltration, right? There was another instance in, I think it was 2021, where there was a New York bank where it was the same thing. It was you know, classic wire fraud, but you know, it gets when you have a persistent foothold, it gets progressively more sophisticated. There was a bank where they unfortunately had you know, an IT guy who didn't necessarily know his stuff, and they ran an exchange server like, you know, on-prem, and it was they had an old email server, the server like, you know, sitting there wired up directly to the internet, sitting in their office, and quietly at a certain point it got owned. Somebody got in. And so they're able to sit there and read unencrypted emails between the CFO and the CEO.
Wow.
For 6 months. And they don't do a thing. They just sit there. And then at a certain point, they say, okay, we understand the communication style between these two individuals enough. They sent a perfectly crafted email from the CFO, or sorry, from the CEO to the CFO on like, you know, 3:45 p.m. on a Friday afternoon. And said, hey, we're opening up a new account. You need to wire like, you know, $160 million to this account in Singapore. Just flatten the bank. They're gone. They're done.
Wow.
It's over. Like you're done, right?
And it's something so simple, right? I mean, that's I mean, the conversation Peter were having when we came on was about, I was talking about cyber insurance for us, right? And, and you know, and then that conversation kind of led into the interplay between almost like chicken and the egg a little bit of like, do you go get a cybersecurity company to audit you and then you go get insurance? Do you work in conjunction with insurance? Do you get insured and the insurance guy is asking like, hey, you guys should probably go do this. I can lower your premiums.
Yes.
You know, I mean, I hadn't even thought about that as maybe like an opportunity.
Yeah, I mean, there's a really virtuous cycle there. It's also, you have to kind of watch out because like, you know, both of those can be kind of predatory.
Yeah, no, not to be collusive in a way that's, you know, but to actually like work in synergy with one another.
Exactly.
Yeah, you know?
I mean, I think that coming out of that, if you have, you know, if you have an auditor that is like, they know their stuff, they're gonna do a good job. You're gonna at least have more clarity on like what your attack surface is, and cyber insurance. If it's cheap, like I said, it never hurts. It never really hurts.
Is there a profile of customer that is in your pocket, like? Like, you know, when we talk about music, me and Jeremy, like when somebody's really in it, they're in the pocket. Like, you know, is there somebody that like is the right profile that needs you? Like, I mean, really needs you? Like they're either at the life cycle of their evolution process as a corporation, or like, you know, what is there some profile of a company that really is somebody that needs, like, even if they don't necessarily think they need you, it would be advantageous either because they're like a year from exit, or they're 2 years from exit, or whatever it is, right? Or they've got something else that's happening. Like, what does that look like? Like, where do you guys focus?
I mean, I think for, you know, so we don't really advertise the due diligence, like the technical due diligence stuff.
No, but I'm just talking about somebody that like when you look at them, they need your service.
Yeah. But I was just saying in terms of like in terms of the platform, what we the majority of our customers our SaaS customers are MSPs. We're moving into mid-market. We have some really much larger customers now that are, that they need us partially because of their headcount. So on that side of things,
What does that look like? Is there a certain number?
yeah,
or?
like if you're north of 500 employees, if you're north of 1,000 employees, then 100% you're gonna you should expect that a part of your IT spend is essentially making sure that you have good cybersecurity tools, right? But to your point, more specifically about due diligence stuff, if you're a year out from an exit, I think it's a good idea to just make sure to keep your nose clean. This happens in the traditional startup space. We think about this stuff all the time. It's like if you want to get acquired, you're building your own data room. You're set up to say like, okay, here's our books. Here's here's our last 5 audits. This is how we do X, Y, and Z. And you want to essentially make sure that you just answer the questions of the company that's going to come in and say, okay, we want to buy you. What does this look like, right? If you don't have this stuff together and you're making north of 2 or 5 a year, then you should definitely think about it. It doesn't hurt. I mean, the reason
those are gross revenue numbers.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. I mean, I think like it really it depends on also what industry you're in, right? Because you can have a really big company that's a construction company, and they're like, okay, I have a bunch of tractors, and I move dirt, and then I pour concrete, and you're like, okay, dude, obviously we don't want you. One thing that I will tell you which hopefully some of your viewers will appreciate is like from a strategic level, if you grow a business to a certain size, have a working capital bank account and have the other bank account. Obviously use a corporate savings account that is firewalled away, totally isolated, and like very few people have keys to that.
Yeah,
to that money. Because I was out at a bar with my friend the other night. It was his birthday, and he's good friends with I can't remember which one it is, but the guy that started the guy that started Who Gives a Crap.
I don't know that, but
it's a bamboo toilet paper company. They went there. It's literally called Who Gives a Crap. This guy's lovely. He's a wonderful human being. And they went, he started it, I think, as he started it for environmental reasons. Like he was just like, look, we should make sure we use sustainable toilet paper. And he, they started, I think, in 2018 or 2019. The pandemic hit, and they just went through the roof. They had it was like in that year, they did 1,200% growth.
Oh, yeah, I could only imagine.
Because
everybody's
of
at home.
Yeah, the pandemic, and also the sort of the empty shells fear factor thing or whatever.
Yeah, for sure.
And we're sitting there, and we have this. He's like, oh, you're in cybersecurity now? He's like, well, what do you recommend for my company? I was like, well, dude, you guys sell toilet paper, so you're fine, but also just make sure that you firewall the majority of your capital if you guys are making good money away from your working bank account.
Yeah.
And he goes, okay. There are people there are people that run right? There are people that run really good businesses and they don't do basic stuff that.
No, look, man. I have so I'll teach you something about lawyers. I have a lot of people in my organization that I think are better attorneys than I am. Mm-hmm. They know nothing about business. Mm-hmm. They know nothing about the business of what they do.
Yes.
They're good lawyers. Yeah. But when it comes to the business side, it's like, and I can't be bothered with that, right? Yeah. So I get you when you're talking about people that are really good at it's like
everyone's focusing on one thing.
Yeah, we represent ISOs, and they sell payment processing, right?
Yeah.
And then I've watched ISOs over time try to infuse other products and services into their sales channel.
Yeah.
Absolute debacle.
Just bombs.
Totally.
Just completely. Yeah.
They're like, oh no, it's the same. We can do it. No.
Yeah.
It's a totally different thing.
Yeah.
So kind of crazy.
So, but the toilet paper / construction analogy, it's just like, you can run a really big construction company, and as long as you do a couple simple things, you don't need to worry about it. It doesn't matter. However, but if you're in payment processing, if you're in a financial services space, and let's just say you're a payment processor, maybe you're also a gateway, maybe you're doing a couple other things, and you're seeing some synergy about how to work these things together. Absolutely, have someone else come in and just try to zoom out and say, okay, these are the vulnerabilities between your different products. These are the vulnerabilities between how your system could be leveraged adversarially, right? Huge. I mean, it's I think that's It doesn't cost that much. I mean, I'm not trying to advertise for us, but we're definitely less than McKinsey, and you can definitely benefit from that.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that, it's funny. We do a lot of podcasts, and we track the podcasts that are really well viewed. We had a friend of mine on here, and his name's Anthony Malatesta. He works for a company called Wellesley Hills Financial. They're a broker in our space. Not just in our space, but they do transactions, but are on the business side. That's like one of the most well-watched of our podcasts because it applies to anybody who's in business.
Yes.
Right? Like anyone. And I think this applies to anybody who's in business because we're in the technology age. It just is what it is. I mean, not that I would have dealt with it the same way, but Ted Kaczynski kind of saw what was going on a lot longer before we all did.
You're gonna get your channel banned.
We're gonna get demonetized. I'm gonna have to cut that out.
No. I mean, I'm not saying I agree with the guy. I'm just saying that if you've ever read it, he seemed to have kind of a beat on where things were going.
Completely.
And I will say, like, we're in the technology age now. Like,
yes.
Again, I'll give a shout out to Alan Koppelman again. He's in the sales. I said it last week. If you're in our business and you're not selling software, you're dead. And I think that what you do, and now that I've seen it from a broader context versus the isolated vision of what I could see based on what you did, it's necessary for everybody. I mean, it is. I mean, I think that you get to a certain footprint and it's really needed. But overall, like, this is a consideration that every business owner should be having.
That was, when Jane called me and we talked about the sort of the problems that he was having, and he was just like, what do you think, can we fix this? And I said, and that's what I told him. I said, this isn't a you problem. This is an everybody problem.
Yeah, for sure.
This is, the nature of the internet, the nature of remote first work, the nature of having a lot of, having a group of employees that are, not co-located. They're like 19 different places.
Yeah, especially with remote work, right?
Yes,
I could see that being even more problematic. Like what you were saying about AI with the video and being able to emulate voice and picture.
Yeah.
Yeah, that could be a real problem.
Sam Altman went in front of the Fed, and there are so many companies across Wall Street that still authorize like large financial transactions through voice AI, or through voice identification, right? So they just, blah, blah, blah. Did you guys see, Sneakers? My voice is my passport. Verify me.
You mean the old Robert Redford movie?
Yes.
Oh yeah, I love that one. I love that movie.
Yeah. So Werner Brandes gets into his office that way. My voice is my passport. That's done.
That's gone. Yeah, totally.
That's done.
Wow.
And Sam Altman went in front of the Fed.
Is it the iRetina now? Is that how we're doing it? Is BIOS the way?
Biometric is very good. We have a biometric solution. I think really what you're going to want is 3, 4, 5 factor, 5 points of authentication. And what happens is it gets smoother, right? It's just like if you guys are here and you're working and you're you want to verify something that's sensitive. It's just like, yeah, are they regionally there? Does their GPS say they're there? Is their IP the same? Is there a biometric factor? You glue all those things together and you're much, much tighter than you would be before.
Well, it's funny you say that because I'll send an email to my bank with something, and then they'll call me. And the lady that calls me knows me.
Yeah.
So I think that goes a long way. But now with what you're talking about, I'm interested to see what they'll do. This is a smaller business bank.
Yes.
By the way, you're in Southern California. If you need a good bank, I got a great one for you. We talk about it offline.
They're great. Yep.
They're an unbelievable bank. But it's interesting the way that they've always operated, and now I'm seeing just things that I've done. So here's kind of a
we've always come from a place of trust. It's like we've used language, we've written things down for thousands and thousands of years, and only really in the last couple decades where we're like, oh, this really doesn't work anymore in terms of trust.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Hypothetically, where do you see? Again, things that I have seen, I was just talking about with the bank of how they've operated. Where do you see the biggest change coming? If you could identify one, because this is the way that I look at it. In payment processing, the one thing that I've watched people routinely try to build is, and now that we've gone e-commerce crazy after COVID and mobile, right?
Yeah.
how do you reduce fraud on the front end and what you said about, doing geolocation and, like ISP and tracking things. How do you do something that's not prohibitive, but is going to create more security around transactions? Like, do you see something that we're not seeing yet as consumers that might be coming?
I think, this is the thing, is that it's all, you have that continuum, you have the 17-year-old, you have the nation state, and it's just like, if someone wants to do something and they try hard enough, it's very likely they're going to be able to do it in terms of an actual breach or a hack. But in terms of day-to-day transactions, I think a lot of the solutions that we have in place are really good. The irony is that, like, AI takes the limelight right now. It is a radical. It's going to be a disruption in a lot of different ways. It's incredible. It is a brand new technology. Everyone's excited about it. But the irony is like, a rolling OTP code, right? Like a 6-digit code, like, Google Authenticator, like, rolled out maybe a decade ago, maybe more than that. That is rock solid as a security measure. Like, statistically, the likelihood of you picking a number like between 1 and 1 million in 30 seconds, and you're sending it to someone and they're expecting you to get it right on the first time, is very, very hard to do. In World War II, we came up with essentially one-time pages. That was where this all started, right? There was the Germans had Enigma. There's incredibly sophisticated encryption, but like there were all these different strategies. One-time pages were essentially you randomly assign a number to each letter, and you use that for that one page, and then the next page you have a completely different set of encryption. Works extremely well. So it's really just about application. It's just about the discipline of organizations simply saying, we have this process, maybe it's automated, like maybe we'll wire in a couple APIs, we have an API, just cook it in place, and then from there things are going to get way, way smoother. The scams are going to continue to get more sophisticated. The human element is often going to be the vulnerability.
Yeah, I agree with you on that one. Yeah, I see that too.
Yeah.
So look, well, before we go there, is there anything that we haven't talked about that you wanted to talk about while we're on here?
No, this has been lovely and amazing. I mean, I think that the main thing. I know your audience is in a very specific sort of area of fintech and sort of the internet in general.
Yeah, but they're entrepreneurial. Like, I talked to a guy yesterday that we do a lot of work for. He's probably a couple years out from selling. I'm like, what are you going to do when you sell? And he's like,
get started the company.
Do it all over.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I was like, are you serious?
Yeah.
Like, because he's going to exit for a significant amount of money.
Yeah.
And I'm looking at him like, really? He's like, dude, I just can't sit still. And I was like, all right,
yeah.
no worries. But there are people that watch this that will be interested in contacting you. How do they get a hold of you?
For sure. You can just go to traceless.com. Our front page is really about securing communications infrastructure specifically for help desks for companies that have an internal sort of like hotline, or they have a helpline where people call in. That is where our tool shines. But we do a lot of consulting, and they can find me through that, or they can find me on LinkedIn. And I think that the main thing is just to what we just talked about. Like, what we try to do is we try to offer like a relatively reasonably priced tool that is very simple, that will in real time secure your business. And so if you're operating a business and you sort of feel like you're not able to, if you're overdriving your headlights, to use the car analogy, if you feel like there's like darkness out there that you're going to potentially hit, give us a call.
Well, it's funny you say that, like, just randomly. One of the vulnerabilities I continually see is people calling in, acting like somebody else, changing the bank account information for where the funds get settled from a merchant account.
Yep.
And then by the time anybody figures it out, they don't even know where it went.
Yeah.
And, trying to track that down once the, like,
so
these are things that, like,
just to give you an example of implementation, we're working with one of the larger telecoms in Canada, and they field between, I think, like something between like 10 and 15,000 phone calls a month. And so they're actually turning on an AI service that will use our system to verify the end user. So it's just like, if you can automate two-factor anywhere you have a human, getting into a situation where they're interacting with a bank or any of your services.
Yeah, I just think consulting, like consulting on this type of stuff to implement very simple processes.
Yeah.
And very simple technology as a safeguard. Like there's so many things that I see that happen that are avoidable.
Absolutely.
I mean, Jeremy will tell you, I preach like, dude, we just that problem was avoidable
All
like,
the
yes,
time.
yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
why didn't we figure that one out on the front end, right?
Yeah,
Like
exactly.
You know,
Exactly.
and so I think that what you do provides great service and value to really plugging holes where you unnecessarily are vulnerable.
I appreciate you saying that. I mean, I think, you know, it's very easy to drink your own Kool-Aid. We try not to go crazy about this, but it's like, you know, we use our own products. We integrate with Slack and Teams, Duo, Okta, Microsoft Authenticator, all of the different sort of like, you know, your CRMs. We're going to integrate with HubSpot pretty quick. We integrate with Salesforce. Right. We integrate with Zendesk, you know. So anywhere there's a spot where people are calling in and you can just say, here, like, let me just send you a quick, you know, 2-factor out of band push that says, okay, now I know who I'm talking to. And now that person can't change the bank account.
I see so much human error that happens that's avoidable. Like it's so,
Yeah.
I think that's great. You got anything you want to ask Peter while we got him here?
I thought it was a great conversation, Peter. And I think
Jeremy.
one thing I'd like to talk about maybe on another podcast in the future is what you talked about, running your business remotely.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
I think that'd be a fascinating topic and would apply to a generally business-centric audience, which we have.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. That is one of the pain points that we have that's not going to go away. Right. So,
Yeah. Well, look, this is great. Thank you for coming on.
thank
Really
you guys
appreciate
both.
it.
This has been a joy.
Yeah, man. So we have Peter Segerstrom from Traceless and also a fellow UCSD alumnus. Like, there's not many of us.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Payments Experts Podcast, a podcast of Global Legal Law Firm. Visit us online today at globallegallawfirm.com. Matters discussed are all opinions and do not constitute legal advice. All events or likeness to real people and events is a coincidence.